So Sarika, what's the next session about?
To share more insights on this, Ajit, we have two iconic leaders come together in a candid fireside chat. The first speaker is the man who needs no introduction, Mr. Harsh Mariwala, who has led Marico Limited for over 3 decades and is the founder of ASCENT Foundation. The second speaker is Mr. Sriharsha Majety, who is the co-founder and CEO of Swiggy. And we all have a lot to thank him for in this pandemic. Prior to Swiggy, Mr. Majety co-founded Bundle with the objective of solving the shipping woes for e-commerce merchants. He holds a bachelor degree in engineering from BITS Pilani and an MBA from IIM Calcutta. Over to you, Mr. Majety.
Thank you, everyone, for having me over for the event today. It's an honor and really looking forward to the conversation. Hi, Harsh.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Great to speak again. It's been only a few months since we last connected. And,
yes.
I'm really excited about the session today and exchanging notes.
Same here. I was talking to my daughter-in-law that I'm going to speak to you, and she said, "Wow, this is a dream company." So you've really done so well. That she has very, very high opinion of what you've done with your company. So congratulations.
Thank you. She's super kind, and I'm very flattered. As you know, today we're going to shoot a few questions at each other. And
yes.
From each other's experiences, mine's obviously a fraction of yours, but it's interesting when it all gets collapsed in the few years that we've had. So without wasting any more time, I'll just dive into the question. The first question that I had for you today, Harsh, during my conversations with you, and even the last time, that left an impression on me. One thing that really stood out always was seeing the culture of Marico and how deliberate you've been about it. But at what point did you start thinking about organizational culture? And can it act as a competitive advantage?
Okay, I think it's one of my favorite subjects. The culture creation is something which I did many, many years back. Those subject of culture creation has got traction in the recent past. I started getting the seeds of having a culture sometime in mid-80s. And at that time, I'm not a graduate, so I'm not a double graduate like you. I'm not even a postgraduate. So I had to learn everything on my own. I was just put into a family business without nobody to guide me. And I had to learn everything on my own. So I used to learn a lot from consultants, employees, and many times many employees whom I employed, they would start complaining about the culture in this company, that this company has a lot of politicking, this company has backbiting, you need to find the right way to grow in the company. So at that time I started wondering what all this is about, and how can I avoid this in my company? And so that's when the seeds started getting into my head. So when Marico was formed in the year 1990, that gave me a great opportunity to create a culture. And I think that got a little bit more reinforced the need to create a culture, because within a very short period of time, I recruited something like 30 or 40 senior managers from different organizations with different backgrounds. And these were experienced managers in the range of age group of about 30 to 40 years. And they were each coming from their own set of beliefs. And for the same decision, somebody would say, let's sack a person if there's a non-performer. Somebody would say, no, we have to be loyal, to reward loyalty. So that really, just ignited the need for me to have some degree of values. And I didn't have any clue how I would create a culture, but I started writing down things on my own, based on my own past learnings. And then I shared that with my team. We discussed and debated, and at the end of those deliberations, I realized that I also had a lot of gaps in terms of what I had written. So I had to change some of my values which I had written. And then
how often have you changed it?
No, I think overall we had one set of values. It's not changed. Then some of the values have got deeply internalized. Like, for example, meritocracy was very important at the time. We started because it was perceived to be a family manager organization. So we had to write that everything will work on merits. But after a few years, people came to know that everything works on merit in Marico. So we dropped it. It is still practiced, but it's not getting reinforced. And then some other new values came in because the business model changed. We went into international markets, so the global outlook came in. So I think to some extent it's got condensed, and to some extent, depending on the environment and the way business was moving into that direction, we added a few values. But by and large, the core values have remained same, and the core values are very, very critical. We take this subject of culture creation extremely seriously. Each and every new employee spends one full day in terms of what is that culture. There are a lot of reinforcements taking place in terms of policies, processes, leadership behavior, and then we also check on those values amongst all our employees every year. So, because I strongly believe that culture and strategy go hand in hand, It doesn't need strategy for breakfast, as it is known as, but it goes in hand in hand. So you need to have a culture which is very crucial to the strategy part, For example, if you're in hospital, safety is very important. So safety has to be one of the values, So depending on the kind of business you are in, we wanted to be an innovative organization. So how do you drive innovation was key in terms of driving the values and building the culture.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But in this fast-paced world, where a lot of employees, especially the millennials and Gen Z, are constantly joining and leaving organizations, especially the last year, it's been called the year of the Great Resignation. And at a time when obviously engagement with the mission, purpose, etc., is at a massive premium, how do you think leaders can be more deliberate and align everyone, the org, with the shared values and purpose in everyday life?
No, I think it's a very crucial question, because if the leaders have to believe that culture and value are important. If the top leadership and the senior leadership in the organization say that the values are not critical to me, these are values which were decided before I joined, then your journey on culture building is over. Because people down the line will also say that, okay, this leader is not believing, so why should I be? So there has to be very strong buy-in, at least among the top 2-3 layers of leadership, that this culture, these values are very, very crucial for the organization. Then only it will percolate down. It is definitely starts at the top, but the key challenge is how do you permeate it all the way to the bottom in terms of that culture. So when a new employee joins, as I mentioned earlier, we spend one full day in terms of we give them case studies, we tell them the history of culture building, and they also experience, because some of our processes, the leadership behaviors are built into creating that open culture, for example. So there is high degree of openness. People don't call each other by surnames. You call them by first names. It's an open office. We have an open house every year within the organization. You don't need to follow those routes of communication. You can approach anybody across organization, across the functions. So they experience that it's a very open, informal, transparent organization. So they, to some extent, before the induction begins, the induction happens once in a few months, because there's a batch of about 20 or 30 people who go through that batch of 3-day induction. On the line induction happens, but this is organizational induction. So they have already experienced that, and I think it's very important to have their buy-in to that. So, same thing happens when you acquire a company. When you acquire a company, especially in some other country, you need to integrate the culture of that company to yours. That may take time. Many times it can take 3 to 5 years, but it is very important to do that also, because ultimately it is a part of your organization, and you need to have a similar culture within the organization.
Very interesting. We're going through some of those motions ourselves, and we just refreshed our values that we created in 2016 for the first time to be more relevant, and we're happier for it.
Yeah, my suggestion is you may start with a longer list. Initially, we had something like 30, 35 values, but then people can't remember so many. So then we cut it down, because I think people should be able to remember what are those values. If you can capture it in one sentence with each letter standing for one of the values, then people may be able to remember far better.
Absolutely.
So now my time to ask you some questions, Harsha. We have similar name, and surname also starts with M. So, team building is essential to a startup success. However, hiring can be challenging when you're starting out, especially when you're hiring so many people to manage this exponential growth. How do you sell a prospective hire on joining? How do you ensure that the person who joins has that same kind of a values with the organization, wants it to practice, and many times because of high workload, you may be tempted to recruit a person just to cope up with the higher workload. So how do you manage this dynamics of hiring on one side in a situation where the business is growing exponentially, and ensure that you hire the right people? And I think separately, that's one. Let's finish that, and I'll come to some other questions after that. Yeah.
Sure. So I think in the beginning phase, I mean, for the first almost two plus years, Harsh, we didn't even have like an articulated culture and values and what that meant. So it was mostly on the touch and feel of the people that we met and spoke in, like roughly maza aaya, I think we'll enjoy working with her or him, is probably the approach that we took. But the point on pitching to early folks itself, I think it would have been incredibly hard if we didn't have some of the college networks that we did, which we leveraged in a huge fashion, which meant that enough people, at least that joined our original core team, were actually connections that we made through like our college networks, people who were looking to become a part of something exciting. So that was a huge help. The other big funnel for us was because we were based in Bangalore and were a service that a lot of local consumers already used. It meant that we actually got some folks who actually also tried the service and expressed interest because they really loved it. There are two folks whose homes I delivered to personally in the first 7 months, who ended up joining us and are with us.
Wow.
So there is always that. So as a consumer also, if you're experiencing the service, the brand, that piques a little bit of curiosity. Sometimes people will be interested in working for a service that they use and make it better. But over time, and that's true for the first 1-2 years, but if you have to speak today now, I think the reason why Swiggy continues to enjoy access to like a really high quality talent pool is the culture. My previous question, I think we've done well to carve a niche for having a strong culture that is not run, with an iron hand, by the CEO, founders, promoters. I think it's a very open culture ourselves, and that just attracts more friends because the NPS is generally high. Of course, the mission is something that we have to reiterate until people get really bored of it. But I get very excited to do the storytelling from time to time. So that's the part of the question you asked on how to pitch prospective hires. Yes. But in terms of what to look for, etc., obviously the kind of talent that joins when things are really, really early is different from, let's say, as you scale when you need seasoned campaigners. I think the comfort with ambiguity in the early days is a self-selection process, and people who join very early stage actually are seeking for like crazy amounts of ambiguity and have to learn like 10 things in a month because otherwise the ship will break. Whereas as you scale, I think obviously the comfort with ambiguity needs to be high, but not as crazy high. And then come with the learnings from the experiences that they've had in the past. So I've seen a market difference. Some of the early core members really scaled well and, adapted into the company's growing version of itself, but it's constantly changing. I mean, now we change lesser every year. So there's a bit more method to the madness though.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about NPS, Sriharsha. So you measure NPS of your customers, you measure NPS, because I heard some people measure NPS of the employees also.
No, we have our own ratings. We're not exactly moved into NPS for employees already. It's just happiness score on 4.
Okay.
Something that we just learn more.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about, Harsh, is, even from the books that I've read about you, as well as the book that you wrote yourself, thanks for that gift, by the way, is the mention about like failures and how lonely it is as a part of the entrepreneurial journey, right? So what have been some of the biggest failures that you encountered in the journey? If you could pick 2-3 of them, and how did you navigate those times personally and as a leader?
Yeah. So if I had to pick up 2 or 3 bigger failures, I would say that I think we wanted to go international in the year around 2000 and 2000, around 2004, 2005. And we were already present in some of the markets where there was potential for our products to grow. These markets were the Middle East markets and the neighboring markets. Bangladesh, we had a big presence. But beyond that, we didn't have a range of products which could be exported to other countries, except to Indian population. And our desire was to go to other developed markets. So I happened to go to US once around that time. And I said, why don't we leverage something which is Indian to go international? We don't have a range, but can we buy a company which is leveraging on an Indian story? So we bought a company which was making products on the principle of Ayurveda. Outstanding products in terms of quality. Very well packaged, really classy. The company was floated by the famous supermodel Christy Turlington and two other ladies. They were supplying these products to the spa industry there. So we said that, yes, this is good. This is Indian, we can add value. Maybe we can grow internationally. But it was a different business model. We had never done any B2B selling. And we expanded it, we grew it, but it was limited, the growth. At that time, I'm talking of 2005, Ayurveda was not that. It didn't get that kind of traction. So we were left with a turnover, maybe 5, 6, 8 crores, and then it was just too far to manage. So we sold the company to the two of the employees who were managing goods, and we had sent it from here. So the key learning, in a way, it was a failure. It didn't do well. It was not a big failure, but that again opened up our eyes. I said, why are we doing like this? Instead of doing this, why don't we expand internationally through some other categories of products we can acquire in other developing markets? So we recruited a full-time manager to look at acquisitions as a way to grow. And many of the acquisitions we made were what we call as proactive acquisitions. That means we made them happen. So we went to Egypt, we studied and briefed some bankers that, okay, these are 2-3 companies, we want to acquire. Similarly, we went to Vietnam. And out of those deliberations, those interactions with bankers, we were able to make 2 acquisitions in Egypt, 1 in Vietnam, 1 in Malaysia, and 1 in South Africa. So, and these were products which were catering to, in Vietnam, we went into male grooming, male shampoos and things like that. Brand doing very well, market leader in male grooming. In South Africa, we went into the hair care for that region, which is very different. Egypt went to hair creams and hair gels with 2 local brands. So the overall, shall I say, the areas where we wanted to go was very clear in terms of beauty and wellness. But the growth came from acquisition, and that was a far better way to approach international markets than go into a business model which was completely different, where we didn't have any experience. So I think that was one failure, big failure, I would say. It didn't cost us much, but we spent a few years unnecessary doing this, and then we went back to FMCG growth. The other is, again, a small failure, but we missed out on an opportunity. We identified baked snacks as a way to grow under our brand name Saffola. And this happened about maybe 12 years back, around that time. There was no baked snacks at that time. And we felt that the health awareness is increasing. So we should launch baked snacks. We launched the baked snacks. Because it was under the brand name Saffola, we said that it should be very, very healthy. So when it came to deciding what was important, health was the most important thing, even at the cost of taste. So that backfired to a consumer buying snacks. Taste is the most important thing. Health comes secondary. So the product didn't do well, and we had to withdraw the products because it was very healthy, but not as tasty. It had a lot of soya and a lot of other things, which was, extremely healthy, but not tasty. The market didn't get that traction. So we had to withdraw. But then subsequently, the learning from that was applied to our entry into masala oats, wherein we had launched plain oats. We were able to capture some market share, but we said that, can we go into masala oats? And when we decided to go into masala oats, we went so overboard on taste. We actually profiled the taste preferences of each and every state. And we said that taste and flavor profile. So in South, we went to Pongal masala oats. In West, we went to Pav Bhaji masala oats. And in some states, you require more spicy. Some states, you require a little bit sweeter. And the product we designed for that particular state was tailor-made to the taste profile of that taste. And that has really done well. In that category, we have 80% market share. It's a new category we built up from zero. And I think we are doing about 200-300 crore turnover in that category within a few years. So again, the learning came from that failure of... so I always say that it's okay to fail, because many times every answer is not going to come out to you through a market research. You have to prototype, you have to go and agility is also important. If you go on researching and then, you may be left out. So it's very important that... so I think these were the two key failures. And I think one of the things which impacts most entrepreneurs, I'm sure you also had many, many failures. I would love to hear from you what failures, and more important, what are the learnings out of this failure? Because after every failure, I've sat down and debated with the team, where did we go wrong and how can we improve in future based on the failure?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you so much for sharing your story there, Harsh. I have had that kind of a year for Swiggy. I think the first 6 years were, I would say, yes, there were always some hiccups, but it was like a one-way cruise. And I guess even when you're trying to be objective and, staying close to what is right and what is wrong, at some point we also felt like, okay, a lot of things are going well, and felt maybe a bit more invincible than we actually were. And we ended up making some choices in investment decisions. We had like a cloud kitchens business where we were both working with restaurants to expand their infrastructure as well as try out some brands of our own. And, the expansion was fast, but at the same time, there were multiple headwinds with respect to the assumptions behind the business. And some of it came to naught when we had just completed like a rollout of the 120th kitchen. And these things take the fair amount of capex. And then boom, bang smack, we landed in the middle of COVID in February, March. And that kind of absolutely looked like the worst decision in investment history in startups almost, when we were suddenly staring at it. We had to scale down by like 3/4 of the footprint, and we're picking it back from there. But I think that jolt was very, very helpful for me. There were multiple other smaller ones, but just 1 year completely going into deep reflection about how did we arrive here and what can I do to make sure that I don't repeat some of these mistakes. Because again, that way, I think it's been a very, very character building year for me. And I find myself asking deeper questions of myself every time I'm making a decision, what can go wrong, and doing pre-mortems a lot better. But
okay, so let me ask you one more question. While scaling up, often entrepreneurs realize that what worked for them in the initial stages will not work for them in the next phase of scaling up. Sharing how compliance, legal, finance are important for setting up a strong foundation for organizations, which many entrepreneurs realize later on. What have been some of the challenges you faced in your scaling up journey?
Yeah, I think 1-2 things come to mind. On building the foundation for organizations early on, I think bang on. And I wish we knew it earlier than we actually figured it out. So we didn't have a solid finance backbone for the first year and a half, too. And at one point, our collectibles in cash was higher than the revenues that we were making. And we had to like really, really go back and do a lot of deep cleaning to be able to stay afloat, but also get the house in order, because just things were moving as fast as they did. We went from being like a 7-member organization to 600 in a matter of 8 months. And I think the world before us completely changed. So I can't stress enough for every new entrepreneur to always be vigilant for making sure that the finance function and the people function are set up really, really well early on, to avoid rookie mistakes that can cost the company. In terms of the challenges that we faced in our scale-up journey, I think one of the things, which is again very different from companies that get built every day when they're bootstrapped and they follow the trajectories, that I think you can control the pace of your company. But with the internet business, when you're in platforms that have like winner takes most kind of characteristics, you don't really control the pace once you get into the business. You have to keep going with the pace, because there's no other way that you can imagine getting out of that fast enough. And when that happens, it forces a lot of challenges in exactly the points that you talked about, right? Where there was a time when we were just growing 3x year on year, and we needed more talent to be able to come and take it from there. And those are times when we have been stress tested, and our talent density has been stress tested in terms of the exact deliberate fit that you may want. And I think in 2018-19, maybe we hired too fast, and we've had to kind of figure out how to really deeply make our process even stronger to make sure the talent density comes back again. So the thing that you asked me in a previous question, right now there are debriefs where the hiring manager doesn't have a say. 6-7 members come, deeply inspired by Amazon practices also, where 5-6 people who don't really have an interest in filling that role come together and are able to have a very dispassionate conversation. The other big mistake that I'd say I've made and have learned in terms of challenges is also org design. Harsh, I think when things are small and not exactly at scale, when everything gets done through tribal knowledge and relationships people build informally, you just believe that the same thing works. Whatever worked at 500 works for 4,000 also. I probably witnessed a massive breakdown of org communication and increased the complexity of how to get things done dramatically, and didn't keep up with the increased complexity. So one of the things that I've reminded myself is to keep taking a step back, and Chief Complexity Reduction Officer. That is one of the jobs that I take to really, like, we are all building the machine that makes the machine. So I have to take that job very seriously now.
It's very important. You have to go on reducing complexity. We had done a project about 1 or 2 years back just to relook, because over a period of time, what happens is whenever a new manager comes in, some new processes come in, and then, just accumulation of many processes. So we engaged, I think, A.T. Kearney, and then we said, have a look at all the processes. We want to be agile. Right. And I think that really helped us, because in pandemic, we were very, very agile, and a lot of processes were just either dropped or simplified, because it took maybe 20, 30 years for us to build all the processes, and then we had to relook at that. Absolutely. So I think it's important. Processes are useful, they're relevant, but sometimes, if you do too much of processes, then, it can lead to complexity, and it can impact agility also.
Absolutely, Harsh. I have one question for you now, Harsh. We are seeing disruptions across industries, and it is imperative for companies to innovate continuously to stay relevant, stay ahead. How does one integrate innovation as a part of the culture?
So I think I have a formula for innovation, and maybe I hope you agree with it. One is to have very good quality talent. Another is to have diverse talent, because diversity brings in different thoughts. Number 2 is to have the right culture where people are talking to each other. Innovation doesn't happen in one corner of a scientist's lab, or, it evolves over a period of time. If I have an idea, I discuss with you, I learn something, it just goes on improving the overall proposition. So you need to have a right culture of boundarylessness, openness, trusting. And then there has to be a high degree of acceptance to failure, experimentation, risk-taking. Risk-taking is a must. Once you develop a certain proposition, you can take a risk. You can reduce the risk by prototyping it on a small scale. The Saffola snacks example, which I talked of, we had only launched it in one chain of supermarkets, and then we launched it in Bombay. But, you can do it depending on the kind of business you are in. You can do it in one geography or one town if you're offering something new, Mm-hmm. So experimentation, prototyping, learning from them, and scaling up. And the role of top management innovation is to be constantly demanding whenever a presentation is made by one of your colleagues, what is the innovation you plan, especially a long-term presentation or next year presentation. Innovation awards every year within the organization, where you select internal awards based on which team has done well on innovation. So when you reinforce innovation from different angles, then, you create an innovative culture,
I keep talking to my leadership team, and we're going to take some inspiration from what you've done with the Intelligent Failure Award at Marico. That thought really stuck with me. So simple, but so powerful how you send a message to the organization. So we are figuring out how to grow our big value ourselves. And that insight was just super powerful for me.
Yeah.
One more question here, Harsh. According to you, what are the differences in running a traditional business versus a digital business? And what does that mean, like workloads, pressures, anything?
No, I think first of all, traditional businesses, I would say that the pace of growth is much, much lesser compared to the kind of businesses you are running or the new age businesses. Number two, the relevance of technology is also digital technologies are used, but not to the extent to which all of you are using, Number three, I would say that the funding normally in a traditional business is done by, you're a part of a family which is running businesses, and most of the time family funds are used. And in your kind of business, it is you're raising funds from some others. You may have a stake and you will have some other co-founders, need not be family members. So there are co-founders could be from, could be your friends or anybody else who can add value to the business, I would say that these would be the key. And then traditionally, the traditional business is required, in our times, required high degree of licensing and things like that. But now I think you all can do it. And lastly, maybe the age at which you are succeeding in creating wealth, if you are successful, is much, much faster than what all of us have done it. Can you imagine now Nykaa, 7, 8, 10 years, I don't know how many years now, they have beaten the market cap of Marico over 30 years.
Right. Yeah, things do go at a crazy pace.
But everybody is not going to succeed. Let me warn you, a lot of failures will be there in the new age businesses, but it's okay to fail, I think it will be great. There's so many unicorns, I think 40 unicorns in 1 year, out of 80 unicorns in the last 10 years, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. Hey, we just got a cue that we have only one more question today, Harsh. Do you want to go?
Yes, I want to know from you something a little bit about you in terms of your own plans of going public, and how do you value these businesses? To me, this is puzzling. How does Zomato get valued at that market cap? The more they grow, the more losses they make. And when will they start making money? And what will make them the profits? If you can highlight something based on whatever, I'm sure you know this much better than any of us.
Yeah, we both have good bearing on each other's profits. So I think in general, the exuberance that the market is showing, Harsh, is just a function of the excitement about how internet platforms, commerce, like the Indian emerging digital consumer is here. And that is driving more innovation and more growth of overall internet consumption and consumption on the internet. So I think that's the big bellwether, which is making people take a very, very optimistic long-term view of the market. As for your other question on when will companies become profitable, I think it'll surely be later than, let's say, the traditional businesses of the past, because we are in a very fast growing market. And I think there are some businesses that can be built if you have the competitive landscape that supports this thing. Otherwise, I think, a lot of businesses, including like, e-commerce with, Flipkarts, Amazons, or with ride hailing or food delivery, have gone, into their investment calendar and are now eking out contribution margins. And the path is clear for, let's say, for the core businesses that we began with. But I think as we invest into newer businesses, I think some red is going to show up for a few more years in that investment phase before things turn around. But I think if you asked me 2-3 years back, I would have had a less clear version of the world than maybe we do.
Would you increase the prices and then that's how the profits will grow, or something else? Or no, where am I missing?
There is a training of the customer that is needed before actually building the categories. That is one. The other part is always continuous efficiency identification in delivery costs or customer care costs, etc. As for your the first part of your question on the IPO, we're definitely will be going public in the next few years sometime, and would love to come get some more advice from you then on how to manage it.
Sure, anytime. And great having you on this platform.